If you've been following the case of Adriana Smith in Georgia, she was put on life support in February of this year after being declared brain dead because she was 9 weeks pregnant at the time. 3 months later, she is still on life support today, and her family has no option to end life support. They must pay for the costs of life support, and this will continue until either the fetus is declared dead or the pregnancy is carried to term, which would be in another 4 months. There's a few details from this case that I want to highlight. First of all, there's this image of her circulating online. That is an image from a previous pregnancy, which I think is really dishonest. You don't look like that when you're 9 weeks pregnant, and that image frames things in a different light. Another thing to highlight is that before she had her episode, which led to her being declared brain dead, she actually did go to seek care, complaining of headaches. Yet she was dismissed with prescriptions before receiving any tests or scans, which I believe is a failure of the healthcare system. We have seen this before with women, and especially women of color, where their pain or complaints are dismissed at a higher rate than other types of patients, and that's something that needs to be taken into account. Another thing to understand is that the family has no agency in this matter, only the state government does. So, because of Georgia's 6 week abortion ban, the family has to watch as their child is being kept alive. And her own mother stated that they might have kept her on life support, but the fact that they had no choice at all is highly concerning. This also raises a great deal of legal concerns. For instance, say that I really want to have a child with someone because I have mental issues and I have this sort of fantasy in my head that someone who does not consent to this really wants to have a child with me. Well, what happens if I impregnate them against their will and then cause them to have a TBI, which causes them to go unconscious? Or what happens if I administer a certain amount of illicit substances that causes them to go into a coma? How is that legally ethical if under those circumstances I can impregnate someone and get to choose who I get to impregnate, and they have no agency to consent to this, nor does their family have any agency over mine? There's also a question of indignity to the deceased. For example, if someone dies, you are not allowed to simply take their remains and use them for whatever purpose that you want. There are very clear laws as to how you can handle human remains. So for the state government to declare this being property of the state, I would argue that there's a case to be made that this is an indignity to someone's wishes. There's also the case of Marlise Muniz in the state of Texas. In 2013, she suffered an embolism and was declared brain dead, but she was kept on life support because she was 14 weeks pregnant at the time. Now, Muniz and her partner both worked as paramedics, and she was very vocal that she did not want to be kept on life support. Despite this, and despite the fact that her fetus was most likely non-viable due to the fact that, just like Adriana Smith's pregnancy, it had hydrocephalus, and it was so deformed that they could not determine the fetus's sex, it still took a legal battle and 3 months before she was eventually taken off of life support. I have a lot of moral reservations about this case, and my general perspective regarding abortion is that I do not have the ability to determine what is best for every single pregnancy. Therefore, neither does the government. For that matter, I believe that the best thing to do is to leave that decision up to the person in question and their doctor or their next of kin if necessary. And generally speaking, when this is left up to a state government, what you'll see is that they do not apply the law equally to everyone, which usually leads to things like forced sterilizations. It's also important to note that in 12 states, even if you have an advance directive, that is, a set of instructions as to what's to happen to honor your wishes, if you're in a coma, a vegetative state, or you're declared brain dead, in 12 states, that becomes void if you are pregnant. Therefore, the state gets to determine what's to happen to you, not your own written wishes. Ultimately, what we are seeing is the ramifications of a ban that is based not on medicine nor science, but the interpretation of a religious text. And we've already seen 2 people die in Georgia because of these abortion bans last year, and now we are seeing this case where someone is literally being kept alive against their family's wishes as little more than an incubator.